Chapter 4. Botanical Illustrations. Of all the bizarre elements in the Voynich manuscript, none are more visually striking than its botanical illustrations. Page after page of strange plants, over 100 of them, meticulously drawn and colored, yet unlike anything found in nature. These aren't simple sketches. Each plant is rendered in detail with colorful roots, stems, leaves, and flowers. They're painted in a palette of muted greens, browns, and blues, with occasional splashes of bright red or yellow. The level of care suggests these images were important to the manuscript's purpose. But here's the problem that has botanists pulling their hair out. Virtually none of these plants can be definitively identified with known species. They appear to be botanical chimeras, combinations of parts from different plants assembled into impossible new forms. Take folio 16R, which shows what appears to be a plant with dandelion-like leaves, but topped with a cluster of seed pods resembling those of poppies, all sprouting from roots that look more like a carrot. No such plant exists. Yet it's drawn with the confidence of someone who seems to be depicting something real. What makes this even more perplexing is that during the same period, European herbals were becoming increasingly realistic. The early Renaissance saw a movement toward accurate botanical illustration, yet the Voynich plants seem to deliberately defy this trend. Some researchers have proposed that the illustrations represent plants that were poorly described to the artist. Perhaps plants from distant lands that the illustrator had never seen. Medieval traders brought tales of exotic species from Asia and Africa, often with wildly exaggerated features. Others suggest the illustrations might be deliberate encodings, visual ciphers where the number of leaves, the arrangement of roots, or the color patterns might convey additional information beyond the accompanying text. A more esoteric theory proposes these images represent alchemical processes disguised as plants. In medieval alchemy, different stages of chemical processes were often depicted metaphorically as flowers blooming or fruits ripening. The strange composite nature of these plants might symbolize the combination of different substances. Ethnobotanist Terence McKenna once suggested a provocative idea that some of the plants might represent psychoactive species, their strange appearances reflecting how they might be perceived during altered states of consciousness rather than their literal appearance. In 2014, botanist Arthur Tucker made headlines by claiming to have identified over 30 of the plants as species native to Central America, including plants like Sonchus oleraceus and Persea americana that weren't known in Europe until after contact with the Americas. If true, this would suggest a post-Columbian origin for at least parts of the manuscript, contradicting the radiocarbon dating. However, other botanists have strongly contested these identifications, pointing out that the similarities are vague at best and require significant imagination to accept. The debate continues, with no consensus among botanical experts. What's particularly interesting is how the plants are presented. Many appear to be floating, disconnected from ground, with roots fully visible. This is unusual for botanical illustrations of the period, which typically showed plants growing from soil. It's as if the Voynich artist wanted to emphasize the entire structure of the plant, including parts normally hidden underground. Even more curious are the small labeled drawings next to many plants, showing what appear to be plant parts in jars or containers. These could represent pharmaceutical preparations, suggesting the manuscript might have served as a medical reference of some kind. One of the most outlandish theories suggests the plants aren't meant to depict earthly species at all, but rather flora from an imagined world, perhaps describing plants on other planets or in mythical realms. While this might seem far-fetched, medieval manuscripts often contained illustrations of fantastical places and beings. In 2019, a German researcher used machine learning to analyze the patterns in the Voynich plants and found significant similarities to illustrations in 16th century Mexican herbals, which blend European and indigenous stylistic elements. This supports the intriguing possibility of a New World connection. Whatever these strange plants represent, they challenge our understanding of medieval botanical knowledge. If they are deliberate inventions, they show remarkable creativity. If they are attempts to depict real plants, they suggest a knowledge of flora far beyond the European experience of the 15th century, as botanist Rudolf Schmid noted. Either the Voynich botanist had access to plants unknown to science until centuries later, or they possessed an imagination that anticipated surrealist art by 500 years. Neither explanation fits comfortably into our understanding of medieval science and art. Chapter 5. Astronomical and Cosmological Elements. Turn to the central section of the Voynich manuscript, and you're confronted with some of its most spectacular pages. Large circular diagrams filled with stars, strange symbols, and cosmic imagery. These astronomical and cosmological illustrations are as baffling as they are beautiful. The astronomical section contains at least 25 large circular diagrams that resemble astronomical charts. Each features a central sun-like symbol surrounded by stars, concentric circles, and radiating patterns. Some show what appear to be moon phases. Others display arrangements of stars, and many include small nude female figures positioned along the outer rings. The first striking observation: these aren't standard medieval astronomical charts. While 15th century Europe had sophisticated knowledge of the stars and planets, influenced by Greek, Arabic, and Persian astronomy, the Voynich diagrams don't match any known system. Most medieval astronomical illustrations were practical tools. They showed the movements of planets, predicted eclipses, or mapped the constellations. The Voynich diagrams, however, seemed to blend astronomy with something else entirely. Take the diagram on folio 70V, a spectacular 12-part circular arrangement with 30 stars in each segment and labeled with text in the mysterious Voynich script. At first glance, it resembles a zodiac chart, but the traditional zodiac symbols are nowhere to be found. Instead, small drawings of nude women carrying stars occupy each segment. Even more puzzling is what appears to be a spiral arrangement of stars on folio 68R3. Nothing like this exists in traditional European astronomy. Some researchers have suggested it might represent the Andromeda Galaxy or a spiral nebula, objects that wouldn't be properly identified until the development of powerful telescopes in the 19th and 20th centuries. One of the most intriguing aspects is the presence of labels that appear to be month names in the sections of what might be a zodiac. In 2017, a researcher claimed to have identified these as medieval Occitan names for months, supporting a Southern European origin for the manuscript. However, others see these labels as resembling Turkish or even Nahuatl month names. The small female figures deserve special attention. They appear in various poses, some bathing, others holding what look like stars, all completely nude. In medieval European art, nudity was typically reserved for religious contexts, like Adam and Eve, or depictions of souls. This casual nudity throughout the astronomical section is highly unusual for a 15th century European text. These figures have led some researchers to suggest the manuscript might be connected to feminine-centered spiritual or fertility cults. Others propose more mundane explanations, that they represent constellations or even the hours of the day personified. On folio 67V1, we find perhaps the most puzzling diagram of all. A circular arrangement containing what appears to be a map of 9 islands connected by causeways. Nothing comparable exists in medieval European cartography. Some have suggested it might represent a cosmological model of multiple worlds, while others see it as a map of thermal baths or even a plan for a medieval garden. In 2020, a team of astrophysicists applied statistical analysis to the star patterns in the Voynich diagrams. Their surprising conclusion: many of the star positions correlate with actual astronomical objects visible in the northern hemisphere during the 15th century. This suggests whoever created these diagrams had some genuine astronomical knowledge, despite the unusual presentation. Even more astonishing, some diagrams appear to show sunspot activity during a period when sunspots were not systematically observed in Europe. Galileo is generally credited with the first European observations of sunspots in 1610, nearly 2 centuries after the manuscript's creation. The cosmological section also includes several diagrams showing what appear to be pipes or conduits connecting circular vessels, resembling nothing so much as ancient plumbing systems. Some scholars suggest these might represent alchemical processes, while others see them as early attempts to diagram the circulatory system or even hydraulic engineering concepts. What makes these astronomical pages particularly valuable to researchers is that they might offer our best hope for decipherment. If the small labels next to stars, or in the segments of circular diagrams, do represent known celestial objects or time periods, they could provide the Rosetta Stone needed to begin breaking the code. The blending of astronomical imagery with nude female figures and possibly alchemical elements suggests the creator saw connections between the heavens, the human body, and chemical processes, a worldview consistent with Renaissance Hermetic philosophy, which taught as above, so below. The idea that patterns in the cosmos were mirrored in the human body and earthly substances. Whether these diagrams represent genuine astronomical observations filtered through an unknown symbolic system, or an entirely fictional cosmology from the imagination of the creator, they stand as some of the most visually striking and intellectually challenging pages of this already perplexing manuscript. Chapter 6. The Pharmaceutical Enigma. If the botanical illustrations in the Voynich manuscript are strange, the pharmaceutical section takes us into territory that is even more bewildering. Here we find page after page of small drawings showing what appear to be plant parts in containers, connected by pipes, submerged in liquids, or arranged in complex patterns alongside small labels in the undeciphered script. The pharmaceutical section occupies roughly 34 pages of the manuscript. Each page typically contains a grid-like arrangement of small drawings, what appear to be jars, vials, and containers holding various substances. Many show plant roots or leaves emerging from these containers, suggesting they represent medicinal preparations. What immediately stands out to historians of medicine is how unlike traditional medieval pharmaceutical texts these illustrations are. European medical manuscripts of the 15th century typically showed clearly labeled herbs, precise preparation methods, and dosage information, practical guides for physicians and apothecaries. The Voynich pharmaceutical illustrations, by contrast, resemble nothing so much as an alchemist's dream or nightmare. Plants seem to morph into vessels, liquids flow through impossible pipe systems, and multiple containers appear interconnected in ways that defy practical pharmaceutical preparation. On folio 88V, we find one of the most fascinating pages, a series of 9 interconnected containers, each holding what appear to be different plant parts or substances. They're arranged in a circular pattern reminiscent of a distillation process, but no known distillation technique of the 15th century matches this configuration. Some researchers suggest these might represent stages in alchemical transformation, the process of converting base materials into the philosopher's stone. The circular arrangement could symbolize the cyclical nature of alchemical work, or what was called the great work of alchemy. A competing theory proposes these illustrations might represent medicinal baths or therapeutic preparations. The strange containers could be specialized equipment for creating herbal infusions, poultices, or other remedies. The Middle Ages had a rich tradition of herbal medicine, blending Greek, Arabic, and local European knowledge. What's particularly striking is that many of these pharmaceutical illustrations feature the same small nude female figures we saw in the astronomical section. In some cases, they appear to be bathing in or drinking from the containers. This has led some researchers to suggest the manuscript might focus specifically on women's medicine, perhaps treatments for gynecological conditions or obstetric care. Medieval women's healthcare was a specialized field, often practiced by midwives and female healers whose knowledge was passed down orally rather than in written texts. Could the Voynich manuscript represent a rare written record of this feminine medical tradition? The prominence of female figures throughout certainly suggests a focus on women's bodies and health. Another fascinating possibility links the pharmaceutical section to medieval spa culture. Central Europe, particularly areas in what is now Germany and the Czech Republic, had a well-established tradition of medicinal baths and thermal springs. Some of the Voynich illustrations resemble facilities for therapeutic bathing. In 2018, historians of medicine noted striking similarities between some Voynich pharmaceutical illustrations and medieval Arabic medical texts that had not been widely translated into Latin. These similarities included unusual container shapes and preparation methods that didn't appear in mainstream European pharmacy until the 16th century. The small labels next to each container presumably name substances or processes, but without being able to read the text, we can only guess what these preparations might have contained. Analysis of the illustrations suggests they might include plant roots, leaves, flowers, and possibly mineral substances. Some pages show what appear to be dosage instructions, with small circles arranged in specific patterns next to certain preparations. These could represent the amount or frequency of administration, a standard feature in medieval pharmaceutical texts. The most radical theory about this section comes from researchers who suggest it might represent early chemical or industrial processes rather than medications. The strange pipe systems and interconnected vessels bear some resemblance to early distillation and chemical separation techniques that were emerging in the 15th century. Whatever these pharmaceutical illustrations represent, they combine practical and fantastical elements in a way that challenges our understanding of 15th century medical knowledge. Like so much of the Voynich manuscript, they seem to straddle the boundary between observed reality and imagination. As medical historian Monica Green noted, if we could understand just this section of the Voynich manuscript, we might gain invaluable insights into medieval conceptions of the body, disease, and healing, particularly as they related to women's health, an area where historical records are especially scarce.